Does Gelo Ball still have a place in the NBA? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, please hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. Back a few years ago when all three Ball brothers were still playing in high school and completely lighting the internet up on fire, everybody thought that all three of these Ball brothers would all be in the NBA, but a lot of people thought the best player out of the three guys was actually Gelo Ball. Back in high school, Gelo Ball was putting up incredible numbers in terms of his scoring ability, as well as showing off his absolute lethal touch from that three-point line. He was shooting a crazy amount of threes every game, contested or not contested, and he was basically hitting every single one of his three-point shots. So that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people thought that Gelo, out of all three brothers, would actually transition to the NBA a lot better than his other two brothers, just because every NBA team always needs shooting on their team, and if Gelo Ball was this lethal from that three-point range and could transition that to the NBA, then he could really be a very, very good role player at the very least. But besides his just great shooting ability, Gelo Ball was definitely pretty effective at actually getting all the way to the basket and dunking over people. Although he wasn't super athletic, he was still able to do it. But one of the underrated things about Gelo's game was actually he was a pretty good player in the post. Obviously, you could see by his frame, he's definitely a very strong guy. And when he gets in that post, he definitely backs down players pretty easily and effectively, gets to the right spot, and easily puts up a hook shot over them, or maybe a post turnaround fadeaway. That's definitely something that I feel like a lot of people didn't know about Gelo, was he was actually pretty good in the post besides his three-point shooting. But everything obviously went downhill ever since he committed to UCLA, and whenever they went over to China, he actually stole something. After that, everything completely went downhill for Gelo. Because after that incident, UCLA actually cut Gelo from the roster, and now Gelo didn't have a college experience in terms of being able to show off his skill set to NBA scouts watching college games. So that obviously affects him tremendously. But also on top of that, on top of just not going to UCLA, Gelo and his family obviously didn't want to go to college at all anymore. So now Gelo was at a disadvantage because obviously NBA scouts weren't going to be able to see him. And on top of that, Gelo was never known as a guy who was going to be a superstar in this league. As I mentioned before, in high school, Gelo was a great shooter and also had a little bit of a post game. But the thing about that is three-point shooters, you could definitely find them pretty easily, and at best, he would probably be a little bit of a role player, maybe a decent starter in this league, but he was never going to be a superstar in most people's minds. So to a lot of NBA teams and NBA scouts, it wasn't even worth the headache of signing a player like Gelo Ball because obviously of the incident, but also his dad, a lot of people didn't like. And overall, just based on the player that Gelo was and people perceived him to be, a lot of teams and scouts just didn't think it was worth it to scout Gelo and actually to sign Gelo. And after playing with Lithuania for basically a half season, that was basically where Gelo was at. He was kind of just waiting, and after being cut by the UCLA Bruins, he was kind of just waiting to get into the NBA. He was working out by himself, but he wasn't necessarily playing with any professional teams or any college teams. And after seeing both brothers, Lonzo and LaMelo, actually being drafted in the NBA, and not only getting drafted, but actually getting drafted very high in the NBA, it was definitely a low point for Gelo. Because obviously, as I mentioned before in the video, back in high school, a lot of people thought Gelo was going to be the best Ball brother out of the three guys. And now when Gelo sees both of his brothers actually got drafted into the NBA, and not only did Gelo not get drafted, but he's actually not in the NBA and not currently doing anything at that point, it was definitely a low point for Gelo. But even though Gelo wasn't playing in college or even playing at any team overseas, that doesn't mean that Gelo wasn't working. There are actually a few reports out that Gelo was actually working significantly hard to improve his game in order to at least attempt to make it back to the NBA, or make it into the NBA, I should say. And all that hard work did eventually pay off when he actually got signed to the OKC Thunder G League team. But of course, that didn't end up lasting long for Gelo, and there's a few other opportunities that Gelo did end up getting, but the moral of the story in terms of all those opportunities didn't really turn into anything. But basically, flashing forward to where we are currently, Gelo Ball was actually playing for the Summer League team for the Charlotte Hornets, and he was playing pretty well as well, I should mention. And it seems like this time was a little different than the previous times where he got opportunities, because then he didn't really play, even if he got signed, or if he did play, he played a few games that didn't really do much. But the difference is, on this Summer League team, he's actually playing a decent amount, but he also is playing very well, which I think bears well for him going forward. But what Gelo was doing during Summer League was actually pretty impressive. He was, of course, as I mentioned before in the video, and we all know his main attribute is his three-point shooting ability, and he was definitely shooting extremely well in Summer League, but some other things that he was doing was getting all the way to the basket and showing us his post moves slightly, not too much, but slightly, and just using his strength and size pretty effectively when getting all the way to the basket, just bullying players out of the way. But of course, his main ability is definitely his three-point shooting, and if he had any chance to actually make it into the NBA and be a consistent starter or even a role player, it would definitely be from his three-point shooting ability. But now let's move on to the question of the video. Could Liangelo Ball actually be a real player in the NBA and actually get signed to a team as either a role player or maybe a guy who gets few minutes but either way is in the NBA after that very solid summer league performance? Now personally, I think Liangelo Ball would have been in the NBA already if he never had that incident in UCLA with the stealing in China. But with that being said, I do still think that Liangelo Ball is an NBA level talent. If he's a good NBA player or not, that's to be decided when he gets there, if he ever does get there, which I think he will eventually. But that's besides the point. I think Liangelo is an NBA level talent to where he should at the very least get an opportunity. And when you look around the league, basically every single team needs shooting. Well, every team does. And when you talk about a guy like Liangelo Ball that's just literally waiting to get signed by an NBA team, I think he's definitely a guy that should at least get an opportunity to see what he could do in the NBA. Give him a few minutes in garbage time, give him a few minutes in a game, see how he performs, see if he can consistently hit that three-point shot at that NBA level with NBA level defense on him. And if he can, he's definitely a very valuable player in the NBA. You always need shooters, and when you have a guy who can hit very contested threes as well as just really space the floor and help out your stars on your team and all your better players on your team by just being a great shooter, I think that would definitely help basically any other team in the NBA. And I think just based on that reason, I think he should get an opportunity in this league, and I think he will eventually. Now obviously the reason why Gelo wasn't signed to an NBA team up until this point was because everything that happened in China, along with the fact that he never really got a college experience to show off what he can do, and also his father who always talks. I personally don't think that that's a fair criticism. Maybe the college thing is, but the other two things I don't personally think is a fair criticism to not at the very least give this guy a shot. But I think the main reason why he hasn't been signed is just because at best a player like that is probably going to be a role player, maybe a decent level starter at best, but he's not going to be anyone crazy. And if there's any sort of headache that would come along with him, I just don't think NBA teams would be willing to deal with that. But with all that being said, I personally do think that Gelo will eventually get into the NBA and at the very least get a shot. And if he's good, he's going to stay with a team. If he's not good, he's going to get cut, and that's going to be it for Gelo. But at the very least, I think he deserves a shot, and I think he is going to get a shot getting signed to an NBA team in the near future. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if maybe he gets signed to an NBA team, or even if he gets signed to a G League team and actually plays there for a long time, and then maybe moves up to an NBA team. We'll see what happens going forward. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Liangelo Ball does still have a spot in the NBA and could sign with an NBA team in the near future? Or do you think Liangelo Ball is just not meant for the NBA and is probably not going to ever play for one? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.